Welcome to the Learn Beach Volleyball Fast podcast, the podcast where we apply the science of mastering skills faster, stories of successful people, life hacking concepts, and other cool stuff to the sport of beach volleyball. If you're someone who is serious about getting better at the sport and wouldn't mind accelerating your learning curve and career with ideas that have been previously hard to find within the beach volleyball space, you'll probably like it in here. I'm Alex, the host of the podcast, as well as the creator of the bigger Learn Beach Volleyball Fast project. Now, let's get started. What's up? Welcome back to the podcast. This is part 2 of my very long conversation with Nejc Zemljak. I sort of interrupted the last episode sort of in the middle of a sentence almost, because there was just no good place to split the episode up into 2. So what I'll do is I'll replay just a minute of the end of the last podcast, and then it will continue until the end. All right, let's get started. I'm now realizing when I'm listening to this and your thoughts is that I think one thing that I need to do for my own game is I think my head thinks that everyone is very sneaky and can change their tactics very quickly. So I don't think I look for patterns enough because I think that they're not stupid enough to do patterns.
I think it's
but I think in reality patterns happen a lot more than my mind wants to do, and I should adapt to those patterns.
Yeah, and even if you look at like some of the top World Tour players, they have patterns, and people try to play a certain strategy against them. You know, and there might be a player that is very dominant on the diagonal, and people are going to decide differently. They're going to try to put a block against him. They're going to try to do a defense against him on the diagonal, or they might even try to double. And people are going to take different approaches to that. But, I think first, people are going to go with what's comfortable for them first. And until you stop that, they're not going to change.
That's true.
A little bit like in that general state.
Yeah. That's probably a good prediction of how people are going to do.
I mean, if my favorite hit is diagonal and I'm scoring against you diagonal, why would I change? True. I mean, a lot of times we just overthink it and it's like, oh, I hit now 2 diagonals, now he's going to know. But if how many defenders actually then take that giant step towards the diagonal to defend just the diagonal? Yeah. And then hopefully, if they do, then hopefully I can see it and just do an easy line shot or something. Yeah. But, that's also the development that goes for a lot of the top players. They develop one really good hit that opens up the court for them, and then they develop a sort of solid or a really good counter. But even some of the best players, they don't use all the shots.
No, they just have 2.
They have 2 or 3 really good ones, and what's important for those hits that they're a little bit on the different corners of the court, so that the defense cannot cover it all.
Yeah.
But I don't want to name any one now, but there's players who have a really good diagonal hit. So they, it's a sharp or a really good diagonal hit they can almost do in sleep. And, they're going to do it until you don't stop it. Yeah. And once, a defender takes a step there, or once a blocker does a giant step or a dive into, then they're just going to use the other side. But it's in a sense, it's way simpler than, we think.
Yeah.
But you have to be I always want to, when I'm coaching, I want my hitters or my players to have one hit that they're really good at.
Okay.
And they can do it almost in a sleep, almost like a fadeaway. I'm exaggerating now. This is not really how I want it, but yeah. But they should be able to do it all the time. Sort of like we used to play this video game, NBA 2K or whatever it was. And Dirk Nowitzki would always do like a fadeaway that nobody could stop. So it's like a go-to move that is almost unstoppable. They sort of lean into the defender, push the defender slightly off, and then they take a step away so nobody can block them. And if you have this shot, if you can always hit 4 or 5 meters diagonal, one of the two defenders has to go for it. So either a defender has to take an early step there, and then he's opening up the line, or the blocker has to either step there towards the diagonal, and then you can see it, or he has to do a giant dive, and you can again hopefully see it. So, yeah.
Would you go as far as saying that that's the secret to becoming a good attacker, is to have that one diagonal 4 meter, like very steep?
No, I don't think it's. I don't think you have to necessarily have that one, but I think it definitely, like, I think every hitter has sort of one go-to that they can do almost in a sleep.
Yeah, yeah.
At least on the top level.
Yeah.
You know, you obviously have Björn here, who, you know, his line was, he could do it. You know, we used to joke that, for example, for Björn, that when the court changed from 9 to 8 meters, that he had to like renovate his living room and shorten it for a meter, that so he could practice his line shot, you know, because it was a joke, but he was so consistent with it that it was ridiculous. I don't know if I even remember him missing one. And
like
we played together.
A line shot to the corner.
Yeah, just a long line shot.
Yeah.
It was always in. So the funny thing was, we played here in Umeå, I think it was 2012, we played Hannes and Steve, Bringborg and Gunnarsson.
Yeah.
Here in Umeå in the final, and because they knew his line shot was so dominant, the strategy for them was that they actually played like a reverse defense. So Hannes didn't go and stand in his diagonal. Hannes started on his line, and Steve was blocking his diagonal, and that was their basic defense against him.
Interesting.
Because his line was so good, they didn't want to even go, so they just did it counter. So they forced him to do a diagonal shot over the block, and Hannes would try to run it.
Okay.
And it worked really well for them.
It did?
Because, you know, in some tough situation, Björn just went back to his...
normal.
Yeah, I'm not saying this is necessarily a good defense against Björn now. I mean, Hannes and Steve had some other things going for them, like, you know, good serve, moving him around, a big block. So it was a lot of things coming together. And I think if they would have played the same strategy, you know, 10 times, after a while, you know, it would be, Björn would, you know, adapt to it, start going to some different shots. But, you know, you just don't expect it a little bit, and it worked out really well for them.
Yeah.
But, you know, because his line was so dominant, you know, they defended the line first and tried to go into his counter shots a bit more, force him to his counter shots. And then they could either block, pull, Hannes could still run for them. And maybe a cut shot wasn't something that was Björn's favorite, so they used it against him. And it worked, like I said, in this one match it worked. I don't know if it would work over a long period, but yeah.
Yeah, over a season or so. How does this feel so far? Is it fun?
Yeah. I mean, as you can see, I'm opinionated as well, so we can have those discussions. It's not a problem.
Yeah, that's good. No,
but the only thing for you is probably that you want to go a little bit more into the volleyball technical stuff and...
not necessarily, like... My goal with this whole project is to have sort of a holistic approach to everything. Like, I love going... It doesn't matter so much about if it's technique or strategy or mentality or how you think about just your career or whatever else that might help us become better beach volleyball players. It doesn't really matter. What I miss, like, is this simple-mindedness, like this is how it should be, but then there's like 15 but what ifs, and then they don't get answered. So I just love having a platform where there's actually time to go into those things, like, because I know these are the conversations that happen between players and coaches when no one's listening.
Yeah. Well, I think we always have sort of an agreed line where we want to get.
Yeah.
So, you know, for us, it's depends. I mean, if you have a one-time coach or if you have somebody who you work with a little bit more long-term. But obviously, if you work with somebody more long-term, I really enjoyed this when I think it happened. I'm not going to go now into names, not to get anybody offended. No. But it was in Germany. One coach was taking over a new team, and he first met with them, and he had a technique alignment meeting. So, you know, like, obviously he's taking over a team that's already been training a lot, and they've done, you know, a lot of training, and they sort of have a specific technical goals that they want to achieve or like how they want to look, or how not how they want to look, but how they want to do a pass, how they want to do a set. So, and maybe his background is a little bit different from what they were doing. So he first met with them just to hear them out, what they're trying to achieve, and then, align this, that they're all moving in the same direction. And I thought this is something that I've actually never heard before. Usually you get a coach and he has his vision, and then he tries to get that vision on you. And I was like, wow, this is amazing, And obviously it was like, like a coach that is, a good coach, who's respected in his circles or whatever. And he still met with the players. He could have just tried to go like, his top-bottom approach is like, I've always done it like this is what I've learned. For me, this is the most efficient. But he actually tried, and he, and even met with their ex-coaches or whatever. But I thought that was a great approach.
Yeah.
But if you have somebody one time, then basically, they can just basically tell you what they know and what they've been taught so far, or what they think.
Yeah.
And then it's really hard to like even look for alignment. But if you're working with somebody who's a little bit more long-term, I think this is great. And I think it requires also a certain personality to accept that it's not always going to be 100% your way, and that somebody wants to do it a little bit differently or stuff like that.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree. And I think that's a good approach to have that sort of, like, you always have beliefs what you believe, but also have that softness, because all of a sudden there is a player that has a different body that you've never seen before. And actually something works for them that you have never seen work for anyone else. And in that case, I think it's good as a coach to be sort of open-minded and flexible enough to think like, interesting, I'm learning something new here.
To a certain level, but then also there's also like, there's always more efficient things,
Yes.
So
I agree.
So there's,
it's absolutely. It's really, it's a tricky waters to manage, or whatever you want to call them. But so this coach then basically had a meeting with the players.
Yes, even before.
Just listened a lot to their theories and.
I obviously wasn't there in the meeting. I was just sort of told about it because I know them, and but I thought it was interesting that he met with the players he is about to take over and coach. It was this, and now he meets with them, and they're doing, and they called it like this technical alignment, or like, so him getting to know their philosophy and them getting to know his philosophy. And I thought that was, great.
It is.
And like I said, I think most coaches I even know, they wouldn't take the time, or they wouldn't consider that, because, obviously it comes a little bit with I don't hope this doesn't come out wrong, but a little bit with the ego, and it's a coach's ego, is like, obviously this, and, all the coaches believe they're doing the absolute best for the athlete. I don't think any of them they're trying to do anything bad to the athlete. But, how do we really know that they're always the most educated and they know the best?
Yeah.
So that always becomes the question. And
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that the players also trust the coach more when they feel like they have been listened to.
Yes.
And because I think beach volleyball is a sport where a lot of people do their own thinking to a big extent. Like they hear some coaches, and then they one day have two different coaches that say the different things, completely against each other, and then they go like, what the fuck is happening now? So then they start thinking themselves. But in general, I think it gives trust to have this approach where you do listen to whoever you're going to coach also.
Yeah, and I think part of it is because beach volleyball is missing so much structure that you don't have a set coach a lot of times. So when you're starting to play, when you're in your environment, a lot of times there are no organized coaching session because the club doesn't organize it. Maybe you're not in the national team, right? So that's why then you get a lot of different opinions. So that's why maybe beach volleyballers maybe reflect a bit more than some others need to. It's out of necessity. So I think some structure wouldn't hurt as well, because then, it would be easier for a lot of players. But on the other side, it's also a little bit of a player's ego, isn't it? If I've mentioned the coach's ego, then there's also a player's ego.
Of course.
Sometimes we're just holding on to stuff because this is what we've been trying, and it's not easy to accept that maybe it wasn't the best way. And now somebody's coming in who maybe even knows better, but we're just holding on to, Because I've always tried to do this, and you hear that so often in indoor and beach volleyball. You know, you get to a new team and a coach is trying to challenge you and like change something, and you're like, yeah, but I don't want to. And they ask you, why not? Oh, because I've always done it like that. You have really no other way of explaining it. And it's like, and then, you know, I've had that in like college team or whatever, and the guy would just go back like, yeah, that's a really good argument there, you know, but it's just egos colliding.
Yeah, it is.
So yeah.
And also I think, because I've done a lot of my own thinking, like I've done a lot of thinking that I then have trained, and then I have found relative success with my own theories. And I think this also creates a type of ego, because it makes it even more difficult for me to hear out someone else's theories that are completely different than mine, because I put so much thought, so much work into creating this thing, and it seems to work.
Yeah, so but it brought you till here. Does it really bring you further?
Exactly.
Yeah. So
that's the question.
That's always then a question that we don't ask ourselves enough. It really got us to here, but will it also get us further?
Yeah.
And maybe we need to change something now, you know, like, is that what you're doing good enough for you to receive Andy Moll's serves?
Yeah.
You know, or Evandro's serves?
Yeah. I don't know. I haven't tried.
Yeah. So, you know, like, and that's the thing though, like with our current knowledge, and this is something that is hard to, we would need to put numbers on it. But, you know, with my current knowledge, I can receive a jump serve maybe up to like 80 kilometers per hour. Anything that goes over 80 kilometers per hour is going to be too fast for me. So obviously I need to train something so I can receive 85, 90 kilometers per hour. What do I need to do? And do I need to judge the ball better? So is it a visual thing? Or is my motor program not good enough? Do I like, you know, do I swing my arms like a golf, or like, you know, like a golf swing? Do I, you know, do something else? There's obviously those two components.
Yeah.
So those are then need to be identified, and, you know, maybe, you know, where is my barrier? Will I be able to be fast and good enough to receive serves that are 120 kilometers per hour? And, you know, essentially that's what you want to get at. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and it's one thing more about this approach of having this humble coaching, or whatever you want to call it, is it takes time. And that's the constant struggle I also have with, or struggle is a strength and a struggle, because it weeds out people. So like if you explain things longer, some people are just not going to listen, because they think that everything should be simple and explained in 30 seconds. So they zone out if someone starts explaining like the intricacies and details. And then some people have the mind of maybe, at least, you know, me and you, where you enjoy the details, and then all of a sudden the short explanations, they become like, you know, why are you dumb explaining this thing? Can't you just talk about it properly instead?
Yeah, but what is the situation now? Are you coaching somebody on a regular basis, or is this more like a one-time coaching, you know?
That's a good question, because if you coach on a regular basis, it's easier to in the long term get into those details.
So probably if you're coaching somebody on a long term, then, you know, in an ideal situation, you have a little bit of maybe even just I'm not going to call it a theory session, but maybe you meet and you align a little bit, or like, you know, you understand the philosophy. But then also, even for me, I don't want my coach on the court explaining me stuff for 2 hours.
Exactly.
You know, like then, and I think that was also, again, principles, general principles, you know, it should be just keywords. I don't need to, like, if you also told me something already like 5 times, then you just need to say 1 or 2 words and I should know what it's about, and I can make this adjustment. But if then again, every time I make the same mistake, you take 2 minutes to explain that stuff to me, I'm sorry, I'm kicking you to the curb.
Of course, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. No, I think my experience comes mostly from the one-time coachings, because on a long-term commitment, it's much easier to over time create this thing. Okay, you have the long explanation once, and then it becomes just a word. It's just when people expect it to be we have never met before, they expect you to give the one magic word that will fix everything. And sometimes it exists. Sometimes you can just be like, hey, imagine you're a tiger, and then they imagine they're a tiger, and all of a sudden it starts working, and that's amazing for everyone. But sometimes it is you need to go into more like, how do we think about this?
Well, I think also when you're like long-term coaching, it's like, it's also, you have to work on, I don't know, it becomes a little bit more repetitive. You know, obviously, like you blow their mind now a little bit with the one-time coaching and explain them something new they never thought about. But then they maybe get it, you know, they're obviously not going to get it 10 out of 10 times. It will take certain repetitions. So, you know, when you're changing something completely, it will be a success when they do it once, because they're going to see how good it feels, how it actually, the result is good. But they're still going to probably miss it like 2, 3, 4 times and only get it once.
Yeah.
You know, so it's, and then you're going to be like, when you're long-term coaching, you're going to try to get it to like, okay, we're going to need to get it like now 4 out of 5 times, 9 out of 10 times, you know, 14 out of 15, 19 out of 20, you know, those are going to become the successes then. So it becomes also just a little bit more repetitive.
Yeah, it's true.
And when you're one-time coaching, you can kind of sort of like, you know, point out one thing that sort of like is a little bit more of a drastic change maybe, or stuff like that, and its success is a little bit bigger. But in the long run, it's also being consistent. So it's not just about doing this, you know, general diagnosis.
Yeah, absolutely. I personally enjoy more the long-term things or one-on-ones over one-time group coaching sessions where you barely have time with people. But there's value in both, and it's fun to do both. We have talked for quite a bit. You need to tell me if you want to run out of here.
For me, it's not a problem, as long as you see a value in it as well.
Yeah, I do. I think it feels like we can just find a topic and it becomes interesting somehow.
Okay.
That's the magic of conversation. So yeah, fuck it. We played the other day. It was really fun for me to play against you and the other guys. I have had a lot of time off, and an amazing thing with having this podcast is I can ask people questions also selfishly. Yeah. What did you see for weaknesses in my game?
Well, I think that's also like, now it depends on you know, different skills.
What did you say? Different skills.
On different skills, like, you know, so you can talk about, you know, I think we all have our, let's call it like construction points, or like, you know, we all are working on something. So and then it's like, are we talking about hitting? Are we talking about passing? And,
I know when I think about my plan to become better, I have 3 main ones, and I might have a 4th one from us playing the other day. The 4th one we sort of talked about before. The topspin serves, I don't have a lot of experience with them because almost no one does them, especially with the Mikasa, especially indoors. So I think I just need more. Maybe I need to take a step further back. Maybe I need to just get more reps of them to see more of those balls. But other than that, I've been reworking both my shoulder health and a lot about how I hit. And I think I'm getting more into, I think soon I need to go more into a stage of becoming a smart attacker. I always have this, I talked with Christian Sørum's dad. Yeah, exactly. And he said this thing that stuck in my mind so hard, which was, again, I hope I'm not misquoting anyone, but he said that Christian had always been, he attacks and then he sees the outcome. Either it becomes a success or it doesn't, and if it doesn't, he wonders why. And is there something else I could have done in this situation that would have created a point? So sometimes that leads to even weird strategies, like sending a float spike into the chest of someone or something like that. But basically having the mindset of that, no matter what the situation is, almost there is a solution. I just haven't found it yet. So I need to find. So basically, you're starting to map out in your mind more and more situations of what you could do there to score points. I've been too much in the technical and too much in just not having pain in my shoulder in the last couple of years, 2 or 3 years. So I think I need to take a period of thinking more like that, of becoming smarter as an attacker.
Yeah, and then if we talk a little bit about generalities again, like I think in Sweden people are trying to get, because they have a little bit of a club structure or they have a little bit of an environment where they can train, they train in a group session or with a coach a lot more than maybe some other places. And there's a lot more emphasis on like people like, if I would look at even at a recreational level here, like anything from almost like beginners on, people are trying to get that feedback. What exactly do they need to do? So it's a lot of focus on that motor program, and it's not so much focus on the visual. If we go back to that basic thought. So like for example, when I have different players, for example in camps, I already know that a Swedish player is going to be a little bit better trained. And for example, a German player that comes there and they do less trainings but play a lot more, it's not going to look as pretty. But usually the German player is going to win if they're about the same level.
Because they're playing better.
Because they're playing better. They just make, the decisions. And, a lot of times a Swedish player, they come in like, they have a perfect situation and, they're going to worry so much about maybe the arm swing or something, but then they're going to miss the ball for like 20 centimeters out. While the German player has no idea how he's done it. And this is now very much a generalization. I hope no German or no Swede is going to get offended by that. But this is just a little bit of a background, for example, from the camp. Is, the German player is going to play that ball more consistently in. And it might not look as pretty, but they're going to get the job done. So it's, so it was maybe like when we played, for example, you also opted out, whenever you had a good situation, you wanted to hit the ball.
I didn't shoot once.
There was maybe like once or twice, but not very often. And also like, we're not the tallest players.
No.
So, it's also like the more you try to hit the ball hard, the less of the court you're using. So you're actually limiting your options. So, and what is the one shot, for example, you didn't use a single time? At least I think. You never used a cut shot, for example.
No, I don't think I did.
And then you also didn't hit a sharp angle. So what does that tell for me as a blocker or a defender?
Quite a lot.
So for example, as a defender, I can maybe scoot a little bit more over to the middle. As a blocker, obviously I don't have to, if I'm diving angle, I don't have to dive towards the sharp angle, but it's, so it's stuff like that. You're basically just taking some court away. So, for example.
Absolutely.
And I think it goes, with the more you play, the more you're like also like, okay, in this, you make decisions a little bit faster. So you recognize the situation a little bit earlier. While somebody who just trains, they're like, oh, but how could have I hit the ball there? So it's a little bit of a both. You need to have the motor program, but you also need to recognize the situation.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
And I know with myself that at this point I'm way skewed over towards the motor program. And then also it seemed that like a couple of times, you took the decision a little bit earlier what you're gonna do. So for example, like there was like, like you said, you're gonna go look at the tape, but the first block that I had against you was just like, I just left you the line wide open, right? And then, so you see that the line is open, I'm like lining up a little bit more in the diagonal, and then I go up, and in the last moment I put my hands back to the line. So I wasn't the read. It was just like, okay, I'm just gonna let you this. I want you to see this. I want you feel confident about it. You make your decision, and then once you made your decision, it's gone. So it was just a show and take. Yeah, absolutely. It's I can feel it's funny. I have the same thing in defense. I can feel sometimes I'm twitching and I'm like nervous and not doing not reacting, and it's the same with hitting. Sometimes I get up and then I decide, and sometimes I'm not. So that's also part of the work hopefully gonna do in the next few months is to try to, but we'll see.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, but as soon as like we're forcing ourselves to do something, you know, when you're like trying to control the movement too much, it's the same. Like I think this is a pretty common one on defense. Like people are trying to know what the hitter is gonna do.
Yes.
And then, you know, as soon as it's in the conscious part, it's obviously slower. So, you know, I think some of the world's best defenders, what they're doing is they're putting themselves in great position, and after that it's just reactionary. If you ask them what they did, they would have to think about it for a little bit. As soon as you're like trying to see like, and I'm like, oh, Alex is taking an approach now, oh, he's going towards the line, I have to go a little bit more towards the line, you're already too slow. It has to be reactionary, but that's why also you need the amount of training that all of these cues that you're taking in, you don't have to take them to the conscious part. But, you know, so you're obviously, it has to be in this subconscious. Where you just react. And yeah, that's why I think a lot of people, they're just like too focused on like, you know, I have to stand in his cut shot, I have to do this. The more you're starting to bring this to the conscious part, and the more you're like, I have to do this, the body becomes tense and the reaction is actually slower than when you have a relaxed. I think if you look at some of the world's best defenders, they look like they're some kind of like spaghetti noodles out there. You know, like their arms are like super loose. You know, they just make those quick reactions as you're stabbed to the ball, you know. Like, you look at Nick Lucina, Taylor Crabb, you know, like, how are their reactions? It's like, the arms are like so relaxed, you know, like, and they just like stab the ball. It's not like they're tense, I have to do this, you know, so.
I agree. And.
But obviously, I think they've seen, you know, obviously they've seen a lot of beach volleyball and they've trained a lot. And, you know, that's why I think a lot of times they just make those adjustments because, you know, for them it feels like intuition, but the intuition was built by repetitions, by training, by seeing, by analyzing stuff, and then also training it so often that it became part of their, you know, almost subconscious.
So would you say reading an attacker is... This is sort of how I think about it. It's not exactly reading exactly what's going to happen, but maybe seeing patterns of, okay, now they can probably not do this. For example, the cut shot, they cannot, probably not do in some situations. But then also making that so many repetitions that you don't need to think about that consciously. Just, you sort of just know that it's not going to go there, and then you still react.
Yeah, so I think one part is... this is now multi-layer for me, so I'll just try to take it layer by layer.
Okay.
So even if you know that there's a high likeliness of the cut shot coming, what does that mean for you as a defender? How much of an adjustment? Will you go and stand in the cut shot? Will you take 2 steps closer to the cut shot? Or will you take only 1 step closer to the cut shot? I think this is the first question.
Yeah.
Because I think... if you go and stand in the cut shot, you're sending obviously such a visual cue to the hitter that he's probably not going to do it.
Yeah.
So I think the adjustments are only the difference. You make such a big of adjustments on defense that the difference is you're not getting the ball to now you're basically diving to the ball and getting it. I think this is the adjustment.
Yeah.
So it ends up being like half a step, maybe 1 step, but not much more. And I think this is already the first common mistake that people do. They're like, oh, I got to see this coming. Yeah, but you're not going to see it in a way where you're going to stand there and it's going to be a free ball for you. If the hitter is somewhat of a good, the adjustments are minimum, you know, like I think if people would go and like maybe watch a Christian Sorum or a Taylor Crabb, like they take different positions, but the differences are not like that he stands there and he just collects the ball.
No.
The differences are minimum, like maybe he takes 1 more step that direction, he leans one way and then goes another way, you know, stuff like that.
Yeah.
It's not about him actually standing there. So first that we have to realize is that, okay, the adjustments are very little. We're talking about a step, we're talking about maximum 2 steps. Yeah. So I think this is the first very important thing. The second important thing is that a lot of the reading or knowing the opponent happens before the game, during the warm-up, stuff like that. But you don't always take all the cue. You don't just go and watch a random guy that you've never seen before and all of a sudden, like on this attack, you're going to read his attack. Because there's multiple things that are happening. So I think it's also a little bit of a preparation. So if I play a first time against you, I'm going to look a little bit of the mechanics. I'm going to look at like, okay, I'm going to look a little bit, okay, is he turning his wrist when he's hitting, or already during a warm-up, during a pepper session? I see a guy constantly doing a thumb up. Oh, okay, I already know that that's what he wants to do. I watch him a little bit during warm-up. How is his jump? Does he rotate his hips? Does he turn one or the other way? Stuff like that. And then you can see, okay, he should be probably better at this hit. And then also you do like a little bit of a statistics while you're playing against him. But in ideal case, you have all of this before. You don't have to do this on the fly. Okay, so like let's say you have a game preparation. So I know I'm playing against a guy who maybe doesn't use a cut shot anymore. He's a crossbody hitter. So I'm expecting something like a straight hit and something like crossbody. So then I know that I'm not focusing on that area of the court. So, but this is then my reading. And then there might be, the reading that might happen is he's in a situation where he cannot hit a certain direction anymore. But other than that, it's, So I think it's more layers.
Absolutely.
And, you know, then it's also, I am still not just focused on the one hit. I still think that in the reaction on defense. So you gathered all this info. You gathered the pre-knowledge about the hitter. So I know I have a crossbody hitter. I know I have somebody who likes to maybe, you know, even shoot a lot. And then I just gather the info of his approach, the set. But then when he actually does the hit, then I want to be almost reactionary again. I'm not trying to know where he's going to hit. I put myself in a position where I can probably take, you know, quite a lot of the court. I'm not just going for the one hit. Unless it's a very specific, you know, there are some hitters that have a very specific pattern. So, you know, somebody might go, you know, run a back set and they have such a strong pattern that they're going to hit, you know, diagonal again. So then you just go like, okay, well, basically almost fuck it.
You basically know that you can go there. Okay, because so here's what's going on in my mind. What I'm realizing about myself as you're talking, and I just want to see how far from this reality your reality is. So at the point of contact, I have two different ways to do. I have one is the one where I think I try to read and I try to predict where they put the ball and I go there. And as you say, sometimes if it's a very repetitive attacker or if I'm lucky, this works. Then I have the other, which is where I just wait and see. But the thing with the wait and see for me is I have zero care for patterns or reading or anything, because as soon as my mind starts trying to figure out something, then it goes into figuring out stuff mode, which makes me less of a reactive player or
makes
defender.
You slower,
Exactly. So I don't have an in-between mode where I can react, but I can still read a little bit. Unless I have that subconsciously that I'm not aware of, that could be the case. But I don't feel like I have an in between. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Do you think you have an in between where you can stay reactive, but you still gather some knowledge?
I think so, because I think, I think it's a combination of both, because. I think the reading part for me is a lot of time what happens before the hit, and not at the actual hit. So I think the reading part is, you know, like, okay, what does he like to do? And then what is the situation allowing him to do?
Yes.
Okay. So let's say I know he's a crossbody hitter, right? And then also the set is a little bit, it's not perfect. So then I'm going to make like minor adjustments. So maybe the set flew already like a bit further out. If he's now a left side attacker, the set was a little bit longer and he doesn't have sort of like a wrist away or a corkscrew or away from the body hit, whatever you call that. So then the tendency becomes even more to the line. So maybe I'm going to take an adjustment step towards the line, but then I'm trying to go back into the reactionary mode because now I'm closer to that line. And whatever happens to it, even if he plays it really good, I still have it. So I don't have to stand there. But now he could still try to, maybe he saw my, correction step or adjustment step, and he might try to do something that he's not comfortable with, but he can still do it. So I still want to be able to react, but I want to force him in the least favorable shot, or the one he doesn't prefer, the one that he doesn't do so well, and hoping for it that he's not going to do it so well. Because, it's just statistics.
Yes, okay.
So I'm now closer to his really good shot or hit, and I'm further away from his not so good one. So I'm just banking on that. So the reading part happened before, and then it's again reaction. It could just be that he mishits the ball. But I think, for me, I think a lot of the people are trying to know where the ball is going to go, instead of just putting themselves in a better position, what is more likely, and then being reactive.
Reactive from there. Yeah.
So
that sounds like a much more manageable thing to do for me.
I still think it's very hard, because like first you're trying to be like, oh, I know what's happening, and you're still trying to make adjustments, and then switch modes to like
turn that off.
Yeah. And I've told a lot of people already when I'm coaching is like, actually take your eyes away from the hitter. Actually look at the ball. Not the whole time, obviously, but before the hit, actually take away your eyes from the ball, from the hitter. Take your eyes on the ball, so you can just, as soon as you see the ball moving to your left or to your right, you just storm off for it. Because especially, we have a few of there's two general types of hitters. People that hit more straight, get topspin on the ball, and people who, are a little bit more what we call thumb up or thumb down.
Yeah.
A little bit, you can see the ball going a little bit more side spin. And what happens with people that are thumb up and thumb down, or a little bit slicing the ball, whatever you want to call that, is after they contact the ball, the arm and the ball are not going the same direction, right? So if you imagine I'm putting my hand on the ball and then I'm turning a little bit, a lot of people emphasize the wrist quite a lot, right?
Yeah.
But you see at the end of the hit, your hand is thumb up, the ball is going a little bit to your left, but your arm is probably going straight.
Yeah.
So you as a defender, if you're looking too much at the hitter, a lot of times you're still, you haven't realized you kind of take in more the arm, that the arm is moving your direction or a different direction than the ball. And you might even be reacting to that. And then you're like, after the hit, you're like, oh, but I should have read that and stuff like that. But you're just taking other cues in.
Yeah.
So for example, especially with like hitters like that, a lot of times I tell like my players that I'm coaching, but now at least for a few points, take your eyes away from the hitter, from the arm that you think you're reading, but always going the wrong direction, right? Just focus on the ball. What is also another general tendency from somebody who's a thumb up or a thumb down? They're not as accurate. Because if I go with my whole arm towards the target, I'm a little bit more accurate than if I'm slicing the ball.
Yeah.
Right? If I throw a ball, I don't know, towards you, my arm would probably go that direction. I wouldn't try to side spin throw the ball to you. It's just a little bit less accurate.
Yeah.
Power transfer is not there, stuff like that. So, also what they do a lot of times, they just lure me into one or the other one, because they do it more hidden, right? I go in the wrong direction, or I'm fooled.
Yeah.
But if I take the foolishness out of it, it's actually an easier shot to pick up.
Okay. Yeah.
Because they're not always going to put it like Björn Berry, like in the deep corner of a line shot. It's going to be one time it's going to be there, the next time it's going to be 2 meters in, the next time it's going to be,
Yeah.
And then hopefully the other ones that are not as accurate, I can still pick up.
Yeah. So in a sense, the people that are good at fooling you, you take that tool away from them by not looking at them.
Well, I think every type of hitting or every type of action has a certain message.
Yeah.
So for example, when you're trying to do a read defense, right? When you're just standing there and trying to go wherever the ball is going, the message that you're sending to the hitter is you have to do a good enough shot to score.
Yeah.
If you do anything less, it's my point. That's the message. But when you're picking a side, you're saying, okay, this ball is going there. So basically, let's say to your left side, and anything that's going to go in that direction, you're going to pick up. But anything that goes to your right side, which could be half of the court, is their point. So you're making a choice now. So it's almost like a 50-50.
What type of message?
Yeah, or are you reading enough? So you're sending a message. So with whatever you do, so if somebody is a slicer, they're maybe not as accurate, but they fool the defense a few more times. If somebody is more of an honest hitter, so a lot of times more with topspin, they become a lot more accurate most of the time, right?
But they don't fool you as much.
They don't fool you as much because even after the hit, you see the arm going the same direction.
So then it might be better to sort of try to read them a little bit more and react a little bit less. Maybe.
I don't know. It's up to you.
Yeah.
But I think it's a combo of things. What are the things you can do, and what are the things that they can do?
Yeah.
You know. So, but it's everything that you do has some benefits and maybe some things that are a little bit less beneficial.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, you know, and then you just have to decide which ones you want to take.
What is going to give you the most bang for the buck, or?
But I also think that, like, when you say about defense, I think people, you know, when they talk about reading, is for them in the perception, it's about I'm going to at the end stand there and pick up an easy ball, while the actual adjustment is just one step. And, you know, you're going to get the ball, but you're going to get it by doing a full sprint or by actually diving for the ball. Yeah. And I think people also take in wrong cues, or they do a wrong analysis afterwards, maybe that sense, where, like, you know, you end up having touched the ball, but you didn't control it, and then you change your position. Whenever I was able to touch the ball, there's a way for me to control it. I just didn't turn the hands the right way. You know, I did something, but it's maybe not so much wrong with my position. If my starting position allowed me to touch the ball,
then it's
what did I do at the contact for maybe my motor program is not good enough to, you know, you should be able to direct the ball there one-handedly as well. Where was your one hand facing, you know? Why were you not able to maybe drop the ball a little bit lower so you get more time, you know, stuff like that. But a lot of times we take things that are not related necessarily.
Yeah, you need to know what is the actual problem. and not think it's something else. That's super insightful.
Yeah, but I mean, it's hard to make, like, you know, I don't know if I wouldn't dare to make a rule out of it, you know, like a rule of thumb, which is already not a good expression, but, you know, like, you should stand there on defense, you should do this. It's a combination of things. And especially in beach volleyball, the attacker has the advantage. So the attacker is expected to score and to win. So, and that's why I think it's good that we play to, you know, 21 points, because you're obviously not going to be able to get every one of theirs. But over the long run, if you know, force them into their least favorable hits, if you force them into, you know, that kind of a stuff, then you win. But I also think that, you know, this becomes a game only at the very, very top. So, you know, I think even a lot of times at the national tour level, if we have to quantify it now, it's more of a game of a serve and pass and who comes into a good position. It's not even a game of, you know, what you can do attacking, what you can do defending. It's more about the basics.
Just getting into a position of attacking.
And, you know, it's somebody doesn't have to be better, somebody doesn't have to be taller. They just serve and pass better. What happens then a lot of times is that, you know, the people have this complex that they want to hit, but actually shooting the ball well would win a matches. But yeah, people just have the complex that they need to hit, that they need to block. There's, you know, I also tell a lot of people when we're training that they should play no block against certain opponents. And I think it would be very good up until a certain level, maybe sometimes even a national tour level. Because if my opponent cannot consistently get the ball in a position where they can spike it, what am I even doing at the net? And I mean, we've trained this, and that was at a time when we were already winning national tours. And we would train to play defense with no block, just two defenders from the beginning. You know? That's
nice. And it worked?
I mean, in the long run, it doesn't then work out anymore because, you know, we played at the level where then, you know, if there's 2 defenders and nobody at the net, the setter started pushing the ball on the net even more, and then the hitter was just basically just hitting it down. But it still helped us because we still come into a situation where here and there you might have to play without a block. You know, you might have scrambled for a ball, you didn't make it back, and stuff like that. So it's still...
So it's rep training for this type of...
maybe even like, but there's I think I would like to believe there's not a situation in the game where you don't have a specific idea what you want to do. And let's say we're playing without a block, what are the hitter tendencies? So it doesn't matter what level, but if I leave you without a block, what are you going to do?
What I'm going to do?
Hit the shit out of it. Most likely, right?
Or do the short pokey.
Exactly. And those are the 2 biggest tendencies, and they're almost universal. So why? Because the first you see an open net and you want to punish the guys or the opponents to, you know, leave you without a block. So you try to hit, and you try to hit hard. And when you hit hard, where do you hit?
So what I noticed the other day, I played against this team that didn't block, was you need to have a steep...
First of all, you try to hit it as down as possible.
Exactly.
Right? So you basically take your orientation point is the net. So also what happens a lot of times, even with some of the great guys, if they're without the block, or with them it happens a lot of times that it's a little bit of an early pull. What do? A lot of times they even do the net, they get the net tape clips on it, right? Because it doesn't matter. It could even be like a man playing on a woman's net. But what do? If they're no block, they want to hit it as down as possible, and their orientation point becomes the upper tape of the net. So a lot of times they actually accidentally hit it as well. And it happens to some good guys playing on a woman's net. Obviously not in the long run, but you know, in those situations. So they try to hit as much down as possible, and they try to hit hard. So that means the direction is almost non-existent. They almost always hit diagonal or towards the middle. Almost nobody hits line on points like that. You would be surprised how many of them, even in indoor, if they're without a block, middle of the court. And then as much down as it's possible in the situation. If it would be possible to hit it 1 meter down, they would. If it's not, if it's only 3, it's only 3. If it's 6, it's 6. But in that point, the attacker is not thinking about, you know, changing the hit, redirecting it, but they just want to hit us down and as hard as possible.
So are you saying that as a defender, you don't go to the line then?
Of course. Why would you go? So you just kind of scoop over to the middle.
And towards the net.
And also what happens then, you know, if it's maybe not an ideal situation for them, you know, you can still hit more powerful diagonal than you can hit line. And so the line is less powerful and less accurate because you have to change something. So that means even if I'm standing now more towards the middle or even in the middle, I still have more time to react towards the line hit. Plus there's a higher chance of you missing it. So, you know, I might have very low chances of scoring, but I'm still trying to increase my chances of scoring.
Absolutely.
So, but everything you do, you try to do it a little bit with like sort of an idea. And like you said, and then what happens? The hitter, like, he gets tired of killing you, or he gets tired of getting dug, whichever one is happening, and then they try to outsmart the system. And they see 2 defenders in the back, what do? They try to do the short pokey, you know, saving energy, being smarter than you, stuff like that. And then it again becomes a reading game. So, you know, can I see based on your approach, based on the stuff you're doing? And that's, again, for me, it's the visual part. You know, the biggest difference for the hitter or for the attacker is to have the same approach for the hard hit and for the shooting part. Usually what happens when we start to shoot is what, you know, you slow down your approach, you're not as aggressive, you tend to look over more because you want to pick a spot where you're going to shoot. You know, you maybe you never open up for the full hit. You know, obviously when you try to hit, you go further back with your elbow, with your arm, hitting arm, whatever it is, right? But so a lot of times when I was coaching the defenders and we just had the option of, you know, hitting or shooting, I tell them like, just look at the hitter and tell me if there's something different. You don't really have to know what it was, but when you're looking at them, you just see that they're slower, they're looking over more, they're not really like opening up as much, or whatever it is, but their approach changes. Then you probably know that they're going to be shooting. Because the hardest thing is like taking a slow, medium approach, or like not going up aggressively and still hitting the ball.
I think Karch talked about this hickey, like you just see that there's something wrong. And that's when you get suspicious.
And then it's again, you know, like if you're expecting a hard hit, it's probably similar to what we said earlier about a jump serve. You probably get a little bit lower because it's a little bit, you know, it's not going to be as far away from you. You know, there's less outcomes again. And you don't have to run as much, but with the hard hit, it's going to be, obviously, you're not going to have enough time. So you're just going to slide sort of into it, one or the other way. These are not the best terminology right now, but it's, you know, visual would be now easier if to the people that are going to be listening. But if you're expecting a shoot, you know, it's probably going to be some of the corners. So you're going to have to take a few steps before you actually get there. So, you know, you're probably not going to be all the way low and, you know, obviously not ass to grass position. That's not that position you're going to have with the hit either, but just to go to the extremes.
Interesting.
But you want to find, so it's probably going to be a little bit, you know, your stance is probably going to be a little bit higher when you're going for a shoot than when you're expecting a hard-driven ball. It's not going to be, again, a big difference, but probably a little bit.
Did you realize all these things as a kid when you started playing this? Or from coaching or from conversations? Or
I think it's like we learn constantly. So I think part of it was playing, part of it was like me going around and not just changing, but actually, I picked pieces here, pieces there, from different coaches, from different environments. And then it sort of becomes into, I think it's important to have sort of a round picture what you want to achieve. And I still think there's room for certain, you know, nuances in there always. But I like to believe that, you know, now it's, I don't think I'm going to get a big flash now that I have to do a 180-degree turn in the stuff that I'm doing. But but I think it was along the way, you know, as a player and then also when you're coaching. And I was actually surprised how much of it was actually having, because as a player, when you're playing, you do a lot of stuff, you just do them. You learn them, and, you know, like even coaches, they don't comment on it because you're doing them well. And there's certain stuff that is very logical for you. And then, you know, you have a group of beginners who have never played before, and, you know, you have to go explain things very differently. So, I mean, it happened just a few weeks ago when I was in camps, and, you know, I thought I explained it to them really well and, you know, went in depth. And then at the end of the session, they said the most basic thing ever. I really don't remember what it was. And I was like, he asked the question, and I was like, that's, I never thought about it that way. And I'm like, I thought I was explaining it to you for an hour. I was like, I wasn't really getting it. I was like, well, cool. But it was like the most basic thing ever. I don't remember what it was, sorry. Like, but maybe like how to hold your, you know, hands together for a set. I don't know. But I was like, yeah, cool. It's cool that you asked, because the same problem that you had, 3 other people had. So I was happy he asked the question, although I felt kind of dumb that I never mentioned it. But, you know, my world at that point is completely different than somebody else's. And, you know, even coaching hobby players and beginners really, really helped me sort of understand the game better.
I agree.
So, but I also find it dangerous, you know, if I don't feel knowledgeable about a thing, then to like teach somebody else how to do it, it's always like, So that was always like my problem.
Okay. So that made you think a lot about things, or?
Yeah, and also like ask people who've been doing it longer and stuff like that, and also like, you know, in the training that I had. But a good example of that is like I've been, you know, obviously fitness and weightlifting and has been part of my program for 15 years now. and obviously I've done a lot of it. I've trained with different coaches, and but I still wouldn't feel comfortable giving somebody real coaching.
In fitness.
Yeah. Maybe, like I would notice a thing or two and I would like give them, suggestions.
Mm-hmm.
But I wouldn't feel comfortable like taking somebody over and coaching them in weightlifting.
Mm-hmm.
Although, my technique is pretty good and I get, like compliments from professionals, whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
And, even with the complex drills like, cleans, snatches, or squats, whatever it is, I've done a lot of it and the technique is not bad.
Mm-hmm.
But I still don't know the whole mechanics behind it, the physiology behind it. So I don't want to be a weekend certificate coach.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
And that is always a little bit like, how much of it do you give? How much of it is like, certified as, so.
Yeah. And I think it's a good example of how complex things can be. Like my shoulder problems, I talked to, I think, at least 5 different physios.
Mm.
And I tried everything.
Mm-hmm.
And what ends up fixing my shoulder is a combination of some yoga thoughts and some my own experimentation.
Mm-hmm.
And then I go like, really? Like 5 different physios? No one mentioned this exercise to me?
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, and these are people that have gone to school for years.
Yeah.
So it's things are really, really complex.
Mm-hmm.
Now, actually, just a few months ago, I went to one of the physios that I usually go to, and I like just sometimes sharing my ideas and getting feedback also. And I said that I did this for my shoulder and it fixed it, and no one told me to do that. And he was like, "Oh, that's really interesting," because according to him, that was something he had thought could be a possibility, but there's no studies showing that that actually fixes shoulder problems.
Mm-hmm.
So he could like intellectually model and explain why it probably worked for me.
Mm-hmm.
It was stretching my lat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
as simple as that.
Yeah.
But he said there's no studies today that show that stretching your lat fixes.
Yeah, I mean, this is a hard topic for me, because obviously this is definitely not anything where I'm an expert.
Yeah.
So yeah, but yeah, I think there's definitely like interconnections, and I don't know. I think I just saw a video recently about it. That, like, it was just about shoulder and like the lats, stiff lats and stuff. Actually, hindering it. So, but I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. And we don't need to go into that. It was more just an example of how complex things are, like both in the physical sense, but also beach volleyball sense, and like how you kind of just need to be careful with advice in a sense.
Yeah.
But this has been a super insightful conversation. I have enjoyed it a lot. I hope you have too.
Yeah.
I do have a few last questions, which the first one of them is there something that you would have wanted to talk about that we didn't? So it's basically an invitation to continue the whole thing over again.
Obviously, I spend a lot of time in beach volleyball right now. It's like, it's my work, it's my hobby, and it's also like, it's I do a lot of it. So, I mean, I do have certain opinions about it, but no, I thought that was good. I've actually done more technical and tactical stuff that or like actually, like about just the game that I usually don't do so much. So I thought it was cool.
You do more technical?
No, nowadays, like I don't, like for me, I think it's important to have coaches, but like I don't necessarily go into like, this school against this school. For me, it doesn't matter that much.
Yeah.
I think people should just do whatever they feel comfortable with or whatever. Obviously I follow a certain school of thought when I coach. Mm-hmm. But for me, like now, because I'm so much in beach volleyball, the whole like sports managerial side of it, the structural side of it has become something that consumes me more than just like, should we play the bugger or the platform more on the side or in front of me? But so that's why it's been a little bit more into how should we, play the game now a bit more than I usually talk about. So that's just it.
Okay, yeah, I see. Yeah. I see. Nice. Second question, fun one. Do you listen to podcasts?
Here and there.
Here and there. If you would be able to choose a guest that I would have on this podcast, now that you know what being on this podcast is sort of like, who would you like to listen to?
I think I actually don't know who you've had already. So is it from this environment?
You can choose whoever in the world.
I think there's quite a few very interesting. So when you're talking about technical stuff, I, for example, I thought I had some amazing coaches. So anything from now already, unfortunately, passed away, but like he was one of the fathers of USA volleyball, Carl McGowan. I thought he was a very interesting mind of in anything regarding volleyball. He was obviously more indoor volleyball, but I enjoyed every second I got to listen to him. And I think also that he was just always a fabulous speaker as well. So that made it even better. Now, the last, the last winter I was in Germany. And for example, I got to train with Hans Vogt. I think he's one of the greatest minds beach volleyball has probably ever seen.
Okay.
When it comes to technical.
Never heard the name.
Yeah, I mean he was on both gold medal staffs. So I think most people know of Jürgen Wagner, who was sort of a little bit more in the forefront. Sort of like I guess I don't know if he was the head coach or how they had that sorted out. But obviously Hans was on both of the teams, and Jürgen and Hans, they worked together for quite a while. I think even Hans was his university professor, so even a mentor and stuff like that. But I haven't met Jürgen yet, so I cannot say anything about him. But I know that I enjoyed my time with Hans unbelievably.
Okay.
It's just a great mind.
Okay.
So
German quality of breaking down thoughts about the sport.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever seen anybody break it down more than he did.
Okay.
But yeah, and then when I was my time in Australia, there was a very interesting mind there in Hayden in Melbourne, Hayden Ellis. So I mean, the attention to detail that he has, and the stuff when we talked about there about arm swing attacking, some of the defensive concepts, it's unbelievable. So I think this has been also my fortune that that I've been to other places, so you get to meet a lot of those people who, if you would put them all in the same room, maybe it wouldn't always gel between them. They would have different views, but you get to listen to them, learn from them, and actually them coaching you. I think that's unbelievable. And I think there's more people out there like that that I just haven't met or just didn't have the fortune yet of working with. And there's a lot of good coaches who have amazing resumes, worked with some of the world's best teams, but I just haven't been able to work with them. So it's so I would like to work with everybody, at least to understand their basic philosophy and how they view the game and stuff like that.
Yeah, I'm super happy I asked you that question, because I just got 3 names that I've never heard of before.
Yeah, but those are just my names, So I think if you would ask other people, they would give you other names.
Of course.
And at the end, I'm not going to be the one who's going to say my names are greater than their names.
No.
So, but yeah. Those have been some, and now I'm also doing, by naming those 3, I'm obviously did some, you cannot always mention all of them, So now I mentioned 3, and now I'm thinking,
who am I pissing off by not mentioning?
Somebody who's now maybe gonna listen, and I didn't mention them, and I'm gonna be fuck. But there's been, and I think there's been a lot of great influences. So for example, one of my first coaches that I started with, I think he's the best coach at coaching the youth that I've ever seen in my life. Mm-hmm. And doesn't matter where I went, I don't think I've seen anybody better than him.
Okay.
So and I think his name is going to be very known because his son is one of the better players in the world right now. But for example, Peter Možić was one of my first coaches, and I've never seen anybody be so good at attracting the youth with his, humor, aura that he just portrays, and then being able to, make him fall in love in volleyball and also give him such great basics that a lot of them develop into great volleyballers.
Yeah.
And it wasn't maybe that he gave them like all the details that some other coaches did, but with the youth or with the kids, that's almost impossible sometimes.
Yeah.
So, but he found a really good way to animate them with the game of volleyball so that they fall in love with it, and still give them really good basics. So when they left sort of, his age groups, that they still turned to be into
then
really
they had
good
the passion and some good fundamentals.
Exactly,
and that's your job as a youth coach.
Yeah, and some of them even had such good fundamentals that I know that at some later stages nothing was added to them, but they still developed into some really good with nothing added. I exaggerated a little bit, but like not much. Obviously didn't have maybe great coaching throughout their career, but they still developed into some really good players because they had really good fundamentals.
Okay, that's amazing.
Yeah.
What was his name?
I think nowadays a lot of people are going to see, like if they watch indoor volleyball, they're going to see there's like a youngster, 19-year-old from Slovenia, Rok Možić. And his dad, I think, he was my first coach. So, and obviously I worked with him for a long time. And even later on, I kept going back and like coaching with him, and he was just unbelievable.
Okay.
And I've learned a lot of just how to do coaching from him.
Yeah.
So.
Amazing.
Yeah.
This Australian coach that you said, the Melbourne guy.
Yeah.
There's this Swedish player girl that I think but she said she was in Australia coached by someone that talked a lot about martial arts and just movement flows. Yeah. Is this the same guy?
Probably. I don't know who the Swedish girl was, but
Ludde's sister.
Yeah, Sigge.
Exactly.
Yeah. So she was there as well. So I mean, I know she's trained with him before, so I don't know what her experience with him was. But for me, I trained a little bit longer with him, and I enjoyed it a lot. And I think he definitely added some stuff to my game. So I'm
okay. Yeah, that's cool.
And it was basically like he saw me and he was like, okay, this is what we have, and then he tried to find ways around it, and yeah.
Okay.
I don't know how much time Sigge or some other people spent with him. And maybe her experience is completely different. Maybe for her it was nothing special.
No, she said it was really good.
Okay. Yeah, I had no idea, but
yeah.
So I thought Hayden was definitely one of the great ones. And then when you're in Melbourne, then there's Big L. He sort of runs the community there. He has his own club, and it's Vic Beach, and I think he learned a lot from Hayden, but he also added a lot of his stuff, and I think he's also a great coach.
Okay.
But maybe I didn't mention him because, Hayden was a little bit more the guy who came up with more stuff on his own. And so, it was maybe a little bit more out of the box than...
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. Super interesting. I need to look into these people.
Yeah, go for it.
So someone who has listened to this whole episode and they're stoked that I took you on and they're impressed by your thoughts, how do you coach nowadays? Can people contact you? Or are you like, no, I'm not? Well, people shouldn't contact me. I don't want more work. I already do too much.
No. Like I said, my primary thing is that I still want to be an active player. So I adjust basically my life so I can be an active player. So I do some coaching, but I do it mainly in the camps. So I've been for example, now I spend 6 weeks with volley tours, which I think should be pretty known here in Sweden, since it is sort of before it was beach camp, now it's volley tours. But yeah, I go on camps with them, but other than that, I barely do any coaching, maybe here and there. If, for example, I'm in Gothenburg, I might take a session or two, but it's not my primary thing. Not anymore. There was periods in between where I did more, and I even had some pro teams and stuff like that, but it's just hard to combine when you're playing it on your own. But I mean, with some, let's say, smaller things like one-time coaching or like a one-time discussion, it's never a problem. So
cool. But at least you have an Instagram that people can follow.
Yeah, for sure.
Which you need to know some spelling for.
Yeah, it's hard spelling, but it's just basically my first and my last name, so it's Nejc Zemljak. So
if the listeners are lucky, I'm gonna spell your name right on the episode name, and maybe I can even put a link there.
Yeah, great, thank you.
All right. And you don't want any other contact info of any sort?
I mean, I'm on the way to have we're gonna do a new website again, and we do have a Facebook page for our team and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So I mean, everybody is happy. I mean, I'm happy for everybody to join or follow or whatever it is, and I'm also happy if you contact me. But I'm not trying to be here too much advertising. I'm happy if somebody even let's say listen to this whole episode. I don't know if it's going to be 2 or 3 hours, but it could be long.
It became long. Another one.
But yeah, if anybody is let's say, obviously I spent quite a lot of time in that, and there's even some side ideas that we're running or some side business and stuff like that. So we're always also happy about some help on the side as well. So I'm never going to turn anybody away. I think it's just sometimes it might be take a little bit longer to answer. But
that's what usually happens. Okay, amazing. Thanks a lot. I think we're done unless you have something.
No, well, thank you for having me. Thank you for taking the time, and I hope somebody else enjoys that as well, not just us two.
I'm sure they will. I have some quite good nerds in the audience.
Yeah. I hope I'm not gonna get too many messages this is all wrong what you're saying. I've been taught otherwise. Okay, well, I believe you.
I think we also talked about the humbleness and how things can be. So shouldn't be so bad.
Good.
All right. Thanks.
Well, thank you.
All right. I hope this has been a good episode and that you have gotten some new insights and learned some things, and maybe it has provoked some thoughts, like I said in the beginning of the first episode, in your mind. At least I have started to implement some small stuff into my game already. I've started adding some cut shots into my game. I started being more mindful of how deep in the court I'm standing when people jump serve me, etc. And maybe there will be some bigger things in the future. So I hope that you guys agree that I should continue making these episodes. Basically, if I can self-proclaim something, I'm going to self-proclaim that I'm the nerdiest beach volleyball YouTube channel. And I feel like there's something good going on here. If I can get these high-level beach volleyball players onto this podcast and have really nerdy conversations with... this was an amazing one. No really time limits. Nate even told me afterwards that it was amazing to have time to talk about things properly rather than more of an interview style where it's what do you think about this? Okay, the next question. More because it is a sport with a lot of details. So it is good to be able to have these deep dives. And I'm getting more and more possibilities, and people are more and more positive to come onto the podcast. So I think that we should all together, of course it's mostly my job, but you guys can also help. I think we should all together try to make this podcast as big as possible. And one little trick that you guys can do to trick the YouTube algorithm or make the YouTube algorithm like this project a little bit more and create some community feeling is to so this is an episode on the podcast apps. You can find it on all the apps, but you can also find this episode on YouTube. I will put the link to the YouTube episode in the podcast episode descriptions. And on YouTube, there's a comment section, and the comment section allows us to share with each other and even discuss things. So if there's some new thoughts, something you learned from this episode, something you're wondering, something you would want to explore more, whatever, feel free to go to the YouTube comment section and write these thoughts down, because then we can read each other's comments and we can learn from each other and discuss. And the YouTube algorithm will like this project more, and we will also get more help from YouTube to make this project grow. So cool. I think you guys know all the other drills. Share this to other volley nerd friends and subscribe to everything. I don't know if I've said this before, but I think there's also a review section on most podcast apps, sort of regardless of which podcast app you use. They kind of tend to have their own. If there's a star system, give it as many stars as you want. I would suggest, of course, 5 out of 5. And if there's a way to write a quick little text about how amazing this podcast is, that would also help, of course. Basically, anything that helps the podcast helps all of us. And it shouldn't take long at all. So that would be really amazing if you wanted to do that. All right, that was it for this time. See you in the next episode or video or whatever it might be. And keep on learning beach volleyball.